Okay. We'll give people a couple minutes to just roll in, or maybe this will be a sparsely attended night. But for the moment, let's just let the dust settle around us. Sink into the room you're in. And just be here. No agenda. Let it all just fall to the floor. So that all that's left is you, your consciousness, your awareness, and your willingness to be present in this moment. Take a moment and just sink in. Now begin to watch the breath. As you breathe in, you're right there with that inhale. As you breathe out, you're right there with that exhale. And as we've discussed in other classes, you're paying attention to that moment in between the inhale and the exhale, and that moment in between the exhale and the inhale, that little gap of nothing space. Begin to watch the breath. Just get yourself anchored, gently focused, and open. And then there are some things I want to talk about tonight. There's an expression in shamanism called stopping the world. It's kind of a rite of passage in your training where you learn to stop the world around you. This world that is in ceaseless movement seems to come to a complete halt, and you're present with what's left. And I'm noticing somebody else just joined, so I'm going to say that again. There is an expression in shamanism called stopping the world. And this is a moment that happens in any shaman student's life where all of a sudden it's like they have suddenly mastered the ability to make time stand still. Sometimes it'll be like everything gets slowed way down, but other times it's like you are just in this place of stopping. It is similar to that space between the breaths. It's like you've slipped through this crack and everything just stops, and what's left is eternity, timelessness. We've spoken before how timelessness is an entry into the meditative state. Stopping the world is the meditative state in its deepest form. If one is going to stop the world, they have to first understand what it is they're stopping. What is the world that stops? Why do you have the ability to stop it? We get so used to viewing the outside world as outside. There's us as a separate person, and then there's this world of activity that goes on all around us. It's funny though, two people can step into the same room and one person will be terribly affected by one aspect of something that exists in the room, and for another person, they didn't even notice it. You know, sometimes I sit with my spouse and they have this very challenged night and everything feels bad, and I sit there and I'm having a good night and everything feels good. We're sitting in the same room, you know, our basement is flooding with water and it's all okay. You know, we notice different things about the world around us. So this world that you're stopping, that you think is so absolute, it's really quite personal. It's really quite relative to you, relative to how you are interacting with this vast quantum field, this vast field of life experience. And no two people see the same thing even when they think they're looking at the same thing. So as we've discussed before, there is this chatter that goes on in people's heads all day long. What is that chatter really doing? What that mental chatter is doing is it's actually creating your personal world around you. all of those attitudes and opinions that you play out over and over and over again in your head are creating your world around you. Projecting it out in 3 dimensions. They're even determining how people respond to you. How do I know that? Because when you stop doing it, people respond differently. You know, after a few decades of teaching, you hear that from students over and over again. You know, since I started meditating, I go to work and it's like different kinds of customers are coming in, and even some of the old ones are just different. You don't realize how much of this starts and stops with you. Very little in common between one person and another, other than the location, whatever that means. Because even the details of the location seem very different from one person to another. So when shamans talk about stopping the world, what's really stopping is you. But when you really do it, when you really let it all go, let it all stop, when you literally stop investing your energy in holding it all up, the world stops. And you're still there. Not you as a personality usually at that point, but you as a consciousness, which is the real part of you anyways. It's an important rite of passage because it has very strong implications. You can hear somebody talk about it, but it's not really until you do it yourself, and that's within the grasp of any of you. But it's not until you give yourself that gift, show yourself, that it can stop. That you really come to see that you are at the center of it, exercising the power of choice, but on automatic pilot, letting yourself be tossed around the universe by this mind that's just running programs on automatic pilot. You have to give yourself the opportunity of stopping everything. First, to do that, you have to slow way down. Because this rapidly moving set of stories and attitudes, opinions, thoughts, they're creating a screen that you're not able to see through. All this color and light, all this movement and feeling is creating this screen that is keeping you from being able to have an experience with what you actually are. So the first thing you have to do is you have to slow down. Slow down your breathing, slow down your heart rate, slow down your mind, while keeping your eyes open, your physical eyes, but also your spiritual eyes, keeping your awareness present. Looking at something with awareness is actually a different way of thinking. The kind of thinking that most people are accustomed to is little more than just playing with waves on the surface of the water. You know, we take our attitudes, our opinions, and the world that we've created around us, and we just start playing with it in our mind and just kind of rearranging things. You're just playing with the screen that you created. Awareness is very different. Awareness puts everything in the context of infinity, everything in the context of reality. And so you slow things down, way down, while comfortably maintaining your awareness. And as you work on that, really slowing things down, at some point, you're going to reach a place where you can feel everything stop around you. And there's nothing for me to tell you about that place. That's something you have to experience for yourself. But whenever you have an experience like that, and then you step out of that experience and the world comes rushing back in, you need to be able to tie those moments down a little bit into your consciousness. You need to be able to thread it into your knowledge. And the way you do that is by asking yourself what the implications of that are. If I can completely stop the world around me, then what does that mean? What does that mean about how time works? What does that mean about the areas in life where I feel victimized? What does that mean about how much control I actually have over my life experience? And it's important to tie those things down because you will get lost again in the dream of life. You will. You'll forget. We all do. But you have certain practices in place so that every single day you wake back up at some point. Every single day, if you've fallen asleep, you wake back up. You sit down and you meditate. When you get really good at it, you can do that in different ways. But in the beginning, the best thing you can do is sit down, place your attention at the forehead and crown, let your eyes fall to a spot on the floor, and watch your breath. And when the mind comes in to take you away, just return to the breath. But as the mind stops bothering you so much, and I say this because we do have some advanced meditators in here, as the mind stops bothering you so much, and you can start to feel the peace of the silence, you have to start slowing your attention way down, slowing your breath way down. And if you can do that, the screen of attitudes and opinions, the screen of thought, will part. And you will have an experience with true stopping. And what's on the other side of that true stopping is the actual real beginning of a spiritual journey. It's the real beginning of coming clear on what you are, what this life is about, how the mind has been put together, how people are kept asleep. It's the beginning of getting your real sea legs in the ocean of reality. So I just want to put that out there. And if there are any questions about it before we go into meditation, I'm happy to answer them. Okay. So let's go into our usual meditation. But I want you to go in with the knowledge that when the mind starts to quiet down and you start to feel that comfortable space. One person is asking a question. When everything stops, is your perception stopping? No, your perception is not stopping. What's stopping is the part of you that is constantly directing your attention outwardly towards the movements of life. When everything stops, you will have your eyes open, and it's like all of a sudden you know from the depth of your being that the entire world, your entire world, is completely still. It's an experience that you almost don't need me to tell you about. You'll know it when you see it. It clicks into place. And it's like, there it is. It requires patience. By patience, I don't mean it requires a lot of time. It requires you not caring about time. So it requires you letting go of time and slowing yourself way down while remaining present, while continuing to perceive. And what you will perceive is the still world. But what is stopping, what's truly stopping, is the filtering of your world through your personality. You are no longer filtering your world through your system of likes and dislikes, attitudes, opinions, and all of the little things that your mind does to constantly shift your attention to make it look like everything is in constant motion. Let's see how close you can get tonight. Any other questions? Okay. So we're going to practice this now, and remind me when we're done to tell you how this is applied in some useful ways in your life. Okay. So we're going to go into our normal meditation. You're going to keep your attention at the forehead and crown. You're going to let your eyes stay open, but just sort of fall to a place in front of you just to get them out of the way. And you're going to begin to breathe. You're going to watch your breath wholeheartedly. Watch it with your feeling body. Watch it with your ears. Watch it with your eyes. Watch it with every cell of your being. And when the mind comes in to take you away from your breath, you're just going to gently return to the breath. Don't play with the mind. Don't resist the mind. Just gently return to the breath. After a period of time, that comfort that comes when you're really practicing is going to start to move through your body. That thing that improves your sleep, that thing that just is this profound peace. And as that happens, just continue watching the breath, but just slow the rhythm of everything way down. Can you feel how even though I'm speaking very slowly, it actually sounds natural? Even the silence at the end of a sentence sounds comfortable. Right. And natural. So you're not just speedy inside your head, but slowing the breath down. You are actually slowing yourself down. You are changing your vibrations. So step into meditation. But when that moment comes, when the mind has stopped jumping all over the place, and you're just comfortable with your breath, begin to slow the rhythms down. Let's try it. To do this, you have to let go of everything. Because it all exists in time, and you are letting go of the thread of time. So open it all up and slow way down. Every shift of the mind pushes that moment away from you. Okay, let's talk a little bit. What is that like for you? What were you able to experience? Someone saying it felt like suspension, like being poised in the center of a prism of stillness. Yes. Absolutely. And some of you might not be able to get there right away, but it's not a binary thing. Surely, as you were slowing yourself down, you could feel the slowing. You could feel the shift in your vibration. Another person says, brief instance of nothing. Yep. As you do that, you become more available to that shift into the meditative state. But it's in that stopping that doorway begins to open. And you come to actually understand what it is to be in reality, to be in that place that is not held up by the thoughts in your mind. Self-existent awareness. And it's interesting. It actually has some practical worldly applications as well. When you practice with things like this, you actually start to gain some control over how time moves in your life. It's something that as you start to figure it out, you start to play with it, and you actually get pretty good at it. And then as you continue to develop, you stop playing with things like that, just because you already know how it works, and pushing and pulling at life is not really the answer. With that said, I think it's an important phase on anybody's spiritual journey that they start to actually exercise some of the control, just to show themselves. But what that can look like is on a night where you know that you've only got about 5 hours that you're going to get to sleep, and you're someone who really needs more sleep than that. As you are going to sleep, you can slow time way down, get it to a near stop. And if you can fall asleep in that space, you will wake up as if you had way more sleep. Another thing that happens, something that will really prove it to you, is you will find yourself in situations where you need to get somewhere, and you know how long it takes to get there, and you don't have that amount of time at your disposal. You can actually slow time way down, step into awareness, and just go from that space, and what you will find is that you tend to arrive on time. You can actually cover great distances of ground with very little time passing. It's not one of those things that, we use often, but when it's needed, when it's really needed, a lot of times you can pull it off. I'm not always successful with it. And certainly not if there's a passenger, and definitely not if a lot of other people have their attention on it too. But when it's just you, when you're just dealing with your own stuff, you have a lot of control over how that time can move. And you might take an hour-long trip and find that it only takes you 20 minutes. I've had it happen many, many times. And it's not because you're speeding. You just let go of all of that. You just drop the string of time and you just go. I've only ever pulled it off with another person once. It's very hard because you have another person in the car that, their attention is not doing that. And so, it's very difficult to completely disconnect from somebody. And that's what you have to do. With that said, if you have people who are dependent on you, just know that sometimes when you disconnect in that way, they feel your absence in a way that can make them feel very vulnerable. So just be sensitive to that if it occurs, as you start to get better at this. You're just going to find that life is very malleable. It pretty much meets your expectations. The problem is we have pretty toxic expectations most of the time. And even when you let go of all of them, this world has a lot of opportunities to pick them back up. That's what makes meditation so important. That at least once a day you're shaking everything off of you and getting back in touch with what's real. Another way that you can use this is to actually get an abundance of work done. So time moves according to shifts in the mind. That's how a human tracks time, is through shifts in time. The more your mind shifts, the faster time is going to move. So I spent 15 years of my life as a massage therapist, and I was good at my job. I was a real healer. Over time, your hands give out, and then you make other choices. But one of the first times I started really noticing this was just the more focused I was, a session would feel like it took forever. You'd be working on somebody, and what would feel like, an hour to you, only 15 minutes have passed. And it's because you're very focused. You've slowed time way down, and you've gotten a tremendous amount of work done. And then you have to figure out what in the heck you're going to do with this patient for the next 45 minutes. Because you've already fixed most of their issues, gone over their entire body. Other times, if you are shifting your attention around instead of just kind of being single-pointed in how you're working, you can actually make that time go a lot faster. And so I would find that I would sort of maneuver that according to the needs of the patient, so that if they needed a lot more, I could slow that time down and give it to them. And they would experience it too. A session would feel just much longer. Like, how was that only an hour, is what they would say. When you go to a place where people are really practicing in this way, you'll just notice time moves differently in general because you fall into sync with people practicing timelessness. But you don't have to go somewhere to experience it. You just need to create your own little crucible, your own little protected environment where you can slow things way down and just get a lot more work done, or slow things way down and get a much better night's sleep. So how do you work without shifting your mind around a lot? Well, you have to see the whole thing at once. So if it's a body that I'm working on, it's, I'm not looking at a person's latissimus dorsi and then shifting down to their glutes and then shifting up to their neck. My attention is just seeing the entire task at hand all at once. And in doing that, you're actually seeing this big picture that bypasses the mind entirely almost. So that really you're just listening with your hands, and your hands are responding and doing the work based on this big picture that you see of the body and the patterning and all of it at once. So there isn't all this shifting, and then that's a way to expand time. If you are doing work in an office, that's a little trickier, but it can be done. It's about finding a way to encapsulate the whole picture of what you're doing so that you are looking at that all at once without shifting your attention around to the details. The details are part of the picture, but you're not shifting from here to there and there to here. If you can do that, you can slow time down. At night, it's very easy. Just go into a timeless meditation, and you can extend that time for your sleep. But it's important to do this not so that you can work some parlor trick. It's important to do this because you need to show yourself the relativity of life. You need to understand almost every problem you have starts and stops with you. You have so much control. You're just not using it. You're just sinking into the flow of whatever your job is. You're sinking into the flow of whatever neurotic person you have in your life. You need some time every day out of that flow, and you need to actually make some choices in those times so that you can actually see the control you have. Now we have about 10 more minutes. I think we should go back into it. But does anyone have any questions or comments before we do? It's okay if you don't. Okay, so let's go back in and just drop the string of time. Just let it all go. Let go of your muscles. They're prepping for a moment that doesn't exist. Sink into this moment. And see if you can stop the world. Okay. So, this week, I'd like you to start practicing slowing things way down. That was my mother, by the way, calling. You know, when you do this, you're going to find that people who are connected to you feel it. You know, they feel the lack. And so sometimes they'll reach out. Like, this is not a normal time where she would have reached out. But this week, slow yourself way down. Give yourself an opportunity to really practice. And by the way, that time that we just spent sitting, that was 5 minutes. Tell me that felt like 5 minutes to you. You have a lot of control over time. You have a lot of control over your perception. And the world responds to it. So this is a way to start exercising it. A way that you can really show yourself. Any questions or anything you want to talk about before we close up? Someone's saying the days are going by slowly. Well, if you want to speed them up, you have to shift your attention around more. But it's not a bad thing for the days to go by slowly, especially if you fill them with things that aren't awful. All right, guys. Thank you. I will see you all next week. Have a great week.